thank you so much for joining me today on the FocusRx podcast. Really excited to have you. I think it's important to have students kind of ask questions and have that insight, because I think that can help other students. And from the feedback that I've gotten from other podcast episodes, it has been helpful. So know that you're helping people out there as you do this, but moreover, I hope this helps you. So before we kind of dive into it, Rachel, I just want to go ahead and ask you to introduce yourself, tell everyone your background, where you go to school, etc.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Rachel Mahoney, and I'm currently a third professional year student at Northeastern University in pharmacy. And I got my bachelor's degree in biochemistry at University of Massachusetts. And I also got a minor in psych, and I decided to go to pharmacy school right after graduation. So that is where I am right now. And I actually started off as a business major a long time ago in my undergrad. Then I switched.
Nice. Well, if you ever took classes, those could help you. But thank you so much for that introduction. So I don't want to take up too much time, so we can go ahead and get started. I think the questions will kind of lend to conversations themselves. So you can kind of take it away and ask. I would say ask the questions you definitely want answers to first, in case we don't get to any other ones. But go ahead.
Awesome, sounds good. So, my first question was kind of when did you decide that a career in industry was the career path that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, good question. So I found out about industry through Dana-Farber, where I was doing preclinical research in a lab. So that's kind of not a pharmacy space to be in. It was just a job for me, but we were collaborating with GSK at the time. And that's how I found out about industry to begin with. And once I started looking into that, heard of IPHO, looked into everything, I was like, oh, look, pharmacies do this. So I was like, I think I'm interested, but I won't know until I get any experience. So I applied for summer internships. I actually didn't get one the first year. The second year, I landed a couple, and I chose Celgene, which is now BMS. And I was in the Global Medical Affairs Strategic Planning Group. So my goal with that internship, once I got it, was like, hey, look, it was hard to get here, so I really want to make the most of it going forward. I don't know if it, okay, there we go. You paused for a second, so I was like, I don't know if it froze. And I really wanted to see if this was for me, wanted to take that summer to decide. And if so, then what functional area do I want to be in? So even though my role was in global medical affairs as an intern, I actually asked for about a couple of weeks to a month in clinical development as well, to just get that exposure. And I think that's one thing that within opportunities, especially when you're a student, you can ask for those things, and most of the time people will be like, yeah. So that was really nice to get that experience as well. And then coming out of that, absolutely loved every single day of that internship. It was the work was great, the people were great, the environment was great, and I liked that industry was kind of, I'm a very independent worker, and I need things on my own schedule, and I need to be able to do things like this during my day. So I need that flexibility, and I saw that industry really led to that. Plus the work there was great, and I kind of found like there was no ceiling. Everyone at every level was still learning, or they were making other changes. I remember the director there in medical affairs eventually actually moved laterally to regulatory. So you see that happen a lot. And I think that it showed you, or showed me, kind of all the paths possible, that there was no ceiling. If I were to end up in a department that I didn't like, it's okay. There's other options. You can always move laterally. So it kind of made me feel like I didn't need to figure out what I needed to do and wanted to do. And I could kind of learn, of course, along with the work being great. So that's kind of when I really decided. And then at the end of that internship, I was like, yep, not looking back. This is what I'm going for. So I guess the takeaways there, definitely get experience if you can. You're at Northeastern, if that's something of interest. Northeastern has great resources for that, but also kind of not be so stressed about having to pick, because you don't have to, and we can dive into that later. But I kind of didn't end up in the department as of right now that I thought I would. So again, there's kind of endless opportunities, which I think should be seen as a really good thing.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I'm still trying to explore the different areas to see which one is best fit for me. So it's good to know that they're kind of flexible and you can just kind of ask if you want an experience in another area.
Yeah.
And I saw now that you are working as a regulatory writer. So I was wondering if you could just kind of tell me more about your role in that area.
Of course. Just to circle back to the previous question really quick, do you have any industry experience thus far through any rotations or I mean co-ops for you guys? And I assume you're interested since you're asking to work in the pharma industry.
Yeah, so actually, my only industry experience was from my undergrad. I worked at a startup biotech company. It was called PNA Innovations, but they've since been bought out by another company. But it was definitely unrelated in a sense that it was lab work. So it was organic chemistry and that kind of thing. And then since then, I switched gears and went to a more patient care side by going to pharmacy school. But I do have that kind of in my back pocket as industry experience from my previous undergrad career.
And a quick tip there, that's awesome. And I think that that's cool. And a lot of people that I talk to have that undergrad and then pharmacy school. And I think you should use that to your benefit. And why I'm saying that is I think especially for applying places, that's obviously awesome that you have those degrees. Because for me, I was always like during pharmacy school, I was like, I don't know what do I say. Like, do I say I'm a high school graduate or do I say like there is no in between? So you have that edge definitely and kind of stack yourself there in terms of resident experience. In terms of the lab work experience, you can really spin that. So I did lab work too. It really wasn't related other than, okay, we're doing preclinical research and obviously with drugs. So like there's your connection to pharmacy. But other than that, it wasn't really. But how I kind of spin that in interviews or whatever is that really gave me the basis to then have a career in the pharmaceutical industry. So I think that story part is really important. So if that's really the one experience you've had going forward, again, just general advice, really use that as like a story piece since you have that experience and you can say, hey, look, I've been on the preclinical side, organic chemistry side in industry, learned this and this and this, can apply that to medical affairs, which is, you know, at a different point in the drug discovery process because of this and this and this. So it's kind of like how you just spin it for your benefit. But I just wanted to say that. But shifting
That's
gears
great
to the
advice.
second question, which was regarding regulatory affairs, where I am right now and how I chose this role, or was that the question? Didn't want to butcher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, that was basically it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, like I said, I thought I was going down the medical affairs track. I really liked medical affairs at Celgene. It was kind of that perfect conjunction between, you know, the science portion, but also being creative, having to present all this different material in these different ways, and making sure it's really challenging having to navigate, you know, this is for your important KOLs out there and your stakeholders and versus this is for your patients. Like all of that was really interesting. And I think coming from a pharmacy background really helped just understand everything. And I think that's the most you can hope for. And then after that, of course, you can use your knowledge. But that's kind of the track I was going down. As you probably know, most pharmacies do go down medical affairs. It's just one of the easier transitions. So that was kind of the plan. I went to mid-year. I applied for medical affairs and clinical development fellowships because that was also something I was interested in just because of the science. Walked away from mid-year with an offer that I declined. And then I was looking for entry level roles. So with entry level roles, the hardest part is really that title because it can depend on really the company as to what that entry level role is titled. So for me, I was really looking into medical writing and medical writing roles. And so that's how I came across my role. I actually found it on LinkedIn, didn't really know anyone at the company. And it was a regulatory writing role. I applied because I just do that. I kind of apply to everything. And if I don't get accepted, great. And when I heard back and went through the interview process, it had been made apparent that the role is like 60-70% regulatory writing, which means really working on the regulatory documents. And then the other half is still medical writing. You still need that basis and the types of documents that come under that are your protocol, your CSRs, which are clinical study reports, and investigational brochures, things like that. So we still do that. And this role encompassing both the medical writing aspect of it and the regulatory aspect of it, I was like, that's kind of perfect in a way. I think regulatory guidelines, FDA guidelines are always good to have. So with that in mind, I knew I wasn't foregoing the medical writing side of it. And if you see, in general, regulatory writing is kind of a subset of medical writing. So it all kind of comes together. I thought that the FDA experience would be great, and everything else fit with the role. So that's kind of how I landed in regulatory. And just to end that off, I really like it. I really like where I am. And if I hadn't, I guess, accidentally come into this role, I wouldn't have ever really pursued regulatory affairs. So kind of all the more to my first point of not being too sure of what you want, because you don't really know until you're in that role. And that's just going to happen over time.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I remember during the event that I actually saw you speak at, you were talking about making sure that you keep your options open and just kind of explore before you decide, I only want this thing and I'm not willing to branch out. So I
Yeah.
thought that was really good advice.
Yeah. And I mean, definitely not be indecisive, because I think if you're indecisive, as everyone says, that comes across in a negative way as well. So I think having enough direction, having good reasons for why you want to do what you want to do, because if you were to pivot, and everyone does that, it's totally okay. But yeah, go ahead. I feel like I'm blabbering on, so I want to get to all your questions.
Oh no, this is really good advice. My next question is just asking kind of what challenges that you faced along the way getting to where you are today in your career.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can resonate with this who have, I guess, gone into pharma. Getting your foot in the door is definitely the hardest part. And maybe now it has become a little easier for me, because I'm I've been at this role for, let's just say, 8 months. Not long at all, but I think that's just been my longest experience compared to any other internship. So I think that sets me up in a better way. But in general, even for this entry level role with the internships, it was a struggle getting my foot in the door. And I think that the biggest thing I learned from those struggles was, again, what I kind of alluded to earlier, but really wrapping your story in the correct way. You said you were at the panel, so the IPHO panel, correct?
Yeah.
So there we were talking about how the resume CV question came up, and I mentioned how omitting things is actually, something that I learned and actually really effective. And I think that all came in, and I incorporated that when I was thinking about my story. In my story that I'm trying to convince someone of being a good fit for a role in industry. What does this random poster have to do with anything? Or what does this random, experience have to do with anything? This appy, that appy, like everything doesn't really correlate to the story that you want to convey. And so knowing what those things are, and being okay with removing things, not just on your CV or resume, but in general, even in your elevator speech, in interviews when you're asked to tell them about yourself, really just highlight things that add something. And I think that pharmacy students specifically don't do this correct a lot of times, because we have all these appies and we have all of these things, and it's great to show that you have experience. I'm not telling you to give them an empty paper, but really, again, highlight what you're going for, especially in industry. They don't, um, unless it really adds to it, they don't really care about it. And unless you speak to it in the interview, maybe, if it's not worth speaking to in an interview, maybe not put it on the piece of paper. That's kind of how I think about it. So everyone's story is different, and everyone's kind of thought process as to how they got there is different. But your job is basically to always just convince someone that you're the right person for that role. So any extra fluff that comes with that shouldn't be there. You wouldn't tell them about your dog because it's irrelevant. So in the same way, don't tell them about some experience that's just not relevant. I think that's the biggest advice I could give you in terms of struggle. Because I think that's really hard to learn. And even me saying that, when you go and actually workshop and sit down and say, okay, what is my story? It's going to take time. And I feel like even as I'm talking to you, like I finesse it in every conversation in terms of, what is my story? How am I showing that? And is it bringing something? If it's not, if you've decided on a story and it's not bringing you back anything, then it's time to change that. So I think that's an aspect within interview prep, within everything that people often omit that I think is really important.
That's really helpful. And that actually also answered another one of my questions, which is great. So we got two in one. And that actually makes me think of another one. So we were talking a little bit about what to include when you're in an interview or in your CV. So I was just wondering, in general, what types of students or what personality traits are employers looking for in a student who is looking to be hired?
I know this is said a lot of times, but really just the willingness to learn. Everyone is very well aware, and this was said in interviews too, and I admitted to it in interviews so many times that honestly, you graduate with knowledge, yes, a degree, yes, but that doesn't amount to anything other than that in terms of experience. And so people know that when you're coming in absolutely fresh. In my first interview at my current role, my manager, she's no longer here, but when I was interviewing with her, she was like, yeah, I know you don't know anything, but that's fine. I didn't either. And so it's just, again, being open about that portion as well. I lost my train of thought there. I did have a point. Restate the question for me really quickly.
Oh, no worries. It was just what type of students or what personality traits do they look for in applicants?
Yeah, so I think it's just being transparent, not about that portion specifically. So being grounded and transparent and saying, look, I have these experiences. I do think they amount to something, but I understand that I'm a student and, coming into this role, I probably won't know much. So show that willingness. And if that comes to literally saying that sentence verbatim, say it, because I think that transparency is also something that's highly valued in interviews. So that would be the first thing, transparency. The second is willingness to learn. And third, just overall communication skills. I think if you communicate well, if you are confident with that communication, you can convince anything. You can convince anyone of anything. I really butchered that. You can convince anyone of anything. And I think it's really true. I could go into instances, but there are many times like imposter syndrome to the max. I've been in situations or interviews where I have no idea what I'm talking about. I have no idea what the role might be, or I have no idea, how I could really contribute. But that confidence definitely takes you far, and you won't realize it, but they will think that you know what you're doing. And so I think those three things, transparency, showing that you are willing to learn, and communication are definitely key.
Awesome.
Give me 1 second. I think it's pausing. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. It was just freezing. We're good now.
Yes. Okay, good. So I think that actually kind of leads into my next question, which is, so in pharmacy school, it's definitely focused on patient-facing activities and a lot of pharmacology. But I was wondering, I know that it's definitely a different sort of job. I I have to figure out how to phrase this question. It's like a different type of career going into industry than it would be for a more patient facing job. So I know there's probably such a big learning curve there since we're not necessarily as prepared, I guess, for that sort of career path. So it does relate to your last question a lot about confidence. But I was seeing if you had any advice on how specifically once you get to that job, how you can work with that learning curve.
I don't think you could ever correctly prepare for it. I think especially your first role, you'll definitely feel it the most. And I can say, and why I say the prepare thing is because when I actually joined my role, it was a team of 6 people. And since then, everyone who was on the team has left, making me the most senior person on the team, which is absolutely crazy. And we all reported, we just hired someone, but we all reported to the SVP before. So there was a lot of learning happening on the job, and there's still that, I might have done it and not truly known the answer of. But I think that that's something that you can't always prepare for. I think the biggest thing is when you go into a role, the first thing you should really do in the first few months will help you do this is understand the key players in terms of people at this company and within the role, right? Your role. So at this company, what is your role? Who are you supporting beyond manager and your immediate team? Because you are going to be working with people that are not in your team. More often than not, you're bouncing things off of your team, but you're working with other people. And so the first thing to understand is who those people are, because once you get to know those people, it makes your job a lot easier. The second thing is always like really asking questions. That'll kind of come naturally, but making sure you're thorough about everything and making sure you know why you're doing everything. You have to remember that you're in a job and you're not a student. You're responsible for what you're taking decisions for, and you are going to be taking decisions. So understanding how those decisions are made, getting all of the information that you can get for it, and then make that decision with peace of mind, soundness that, hey, it's I made this decision because of this, whether it's because of the scientific data, whether it's because of some conversation you have some sound reason. I think you really start getting confused at work if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. So I would encourage you and everyone else to really figure that why part out and who part out. So who am I working with apart from my manager and my team? Why am I working with them? And then understanding kind of the key players in terms of people, and then also understanding the key terms in terms of your role exactly and why you're doing what you're doing.
Awesome. And I know we touched on this just a bit earlier, but I was wondering, what is your favorite piece of networking advice, or what did you find most helpful when you were networking?
Do it all the time, and don't call it networking. And we unfortunately have to always say, network, 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 but it's beyond that. And I think once I got beyond having it in my head that I need to network, it became so much easier. Maybe it was because I have a social personality, and so it was kind of easier to assimilate into that. But at first, networking is hard, it's awkward, it's weird. But think about it like a normal conversation. And so if you need to practice like that, then do that. When you're in the metro, or if you're at Starbucks or something. I don't know about in COVID, but in general, those people who just stand there and strike up a conversation out of the blue. And most of the time, if you're the receiver of that, you're like, whoa, that was cool. And so that's a really good way, I think, to practice. You don't have to network always for like, hey, I'm a student, I need help, And I think that if you look at it different than that scenario, you'll get a lot more out of it. So just having true conversations, and maybe starting out with not even, work related stuff at all. But I realized that I actually started liking networking because you meet so many cool people and you can have so many cool conversations. It's just about that first awkward reach out. So be the one to do that. They're probably thinking it too. It's gonna be awkward. It's fine. Everyone knows how that goes. So the awkwardness kind of won't be attested to you anyway. And if it goes south, like it's a stranger, so you could just not talk to them ever again. And so I think that's also the other piece. You can reach out to people, and if they don't respond, or if the conversation doesn't go well, you don't have to continue that relationship. You're not forced to have these relationships with strangers, but the point here is to maybe reach out to 100 people, get to know 10 and have good relationships with 2, And I would call that a success of networking. So get as many in the pool as you can, and you'll connect with the people that you're kind of meant to connect with, and that'll naturally happen. But I think just taking the stress out of it and just, striking up conversations. And you can practice that on LinkedIn as well. Again, don't reach out for work always. Just be like, hey, I looked, you're, a yoga coach. I love doing yoga, would love to, keep in touch. And then if you go from there and be like, oh my God, you work in pharma too. I am looking to go into pharma, would love to talk one day, and kind of do it through that. So it doesn't always have to have a formula to it. I know it's scary, but I started just like networking everywhere, where it became a habit. I was meeting everyone. I'd just be like, oh yeah, like I'm looking for an internship here. Let me know if you know anyone. And it was just like, it just came out naturally. And technically that was networking. It was to strangers, but just kind of getting the habit of it and practice of it, you'll realize that you want to kind of infuse that in general, and it'll span outside of your professional world. You'll start just having those normal conversations and get better at it, even in normal scenarios, which sounds weird, but it's not.
That definitely makes sense, though. I guess it's more just like building relationships and not making it specifically about work all the time, just making sure to build those relationships in general.
Exactly. And you know that, like, the random person who reaches out on a plane when you're sitting next to them and you end up talking for 2 hours, or anywhere, you remember those random things. And that comment doesn't always start from something professional. So think about that too. You kind of want to be that person for other people, and they'll remember you better because you did that.
So true.
Yeah.
And so, just in the interest of time, I am going to switch gears a little bit because I have some questions about. So, I was wondering, I noticed that you are kind of an entrepreneur. You have your own YouTube channel and you're doing this job in industry, which I think is really cool. So, I was just wondering if you had any tips on kind of staying organized, staying balanced with a work life balance, and also balancing all your other endeavors at the same time. And just how do you do that and avoid burnout?
Yeah, organization is definitely the key. The two tools that I would say I use are Evernote, and most recently Google Tasks. So I just found out like a month ago that on Google you can put tasks and they'll come up on each day at the top. And that's helpful for me because all of my calendars, so my work calendar, my personal calendar, whatever, is connected to my Google Calendar. So I just kind of, I actually have my leftmost tab always open, always open to Google Calendar. And so I have my calendar, so all of my day's events, my meetings, etc., and then my tasks at the top. And it's really easy to kind of toggle them between the days. So if I don't get anything done today, I just move it to the next day, and I can strike through and mark it done. And I used to do my to-do list through Evernote, and this is so much better. So if you use Google Calendar, use that. But if not, I know there's other things like that on other calendars. So kind of, I think instead of having different systems, the key there is to really pick a system and make it work for you. Google Calendar, super simple. I don't have much personalization on that, but it works. It's a system that works, my calendar and my to-dos. Evernote, on the other hand, is something that I've started in the last like 2 months, really, to use it as a database of my life, if that makes sense. So I had been using Evernote here and there before, and I'd had, notes everywhere organized, but in files, but not on a system like Evernote. And the cool thing with Evernote is it's searchable. Even images are searchable. So if you're to scan your, therapeutic notes and put them in, you can search for words within your handwriting and it'll search it. So that's super cool. And I don't use it for school notes. I know there's Notability and other things that might be more helpful, but I type everything there. All of my notes, all of my video scripts, all of my meetings like this, any notes that I have from work that I'm in meetings, meeting minutes, anything that I'm writing down kind of goes in Evernote. So it's kind of a nice brain dump, because if it doesn't end up in the right place, you can search for it and take it to the right place, or it's just been super helpful for me. And it's kind of how I've stayed organized with everything. So I would highly recommend that. And good timing. My Evernote tour video is actually coming out on Thursday. So good time.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I've never heard of that. So I'm definitely going to be watching that video.
Yeah, it's super helpful. It's basically, you put notes into a notebook. It's pretty simple. And then you can group notebooks, but it's super helpful. So I have one for my channel. I have one for, my MBA classes. I have one for work, obviously. And so then, and the different notebooks within the groups, I think really helps too. So you can have like school, and then you can have your different folders like therapeutics, pharmacology, whatever. And then have your notes in between them. So there's that, there's Bear, there's Notion. Those are Bear, Notion, and Evernote, probably the three most popular. So if you're interested, look at all of them and I guess assess. They all have different features, basically do the same thing, but yeah.
Good to know, because I have my to-do list, I have my calendar, I have them all separate. So that would be cool to like compile everything into one. A lot more easy to manage.
Exactly.
And I know you mentioned your MBA. So actually that was one of my questions, and this will probably be the last question just in the interest of time. But so I was wondering what advice you have in order to kind of develop yourself outside of pharmacy school that can be beneficial for a career in industry, or just whatever you think in general would be good to develop yourself outside.
Yeah. So because you mentioned the MBA, I want to just note on that I don't think a master's is necessary at all. In full transparency, I did it because our school, MCP, offers it if you finish a doctorate program there. So because of that, they offered it. I was like, that makes sense. And out of the options, I chose MBA in healthcare management. There was also MPH, Master's in Regulatory Affairs, and a few other ones. So that's why I did it. Had I not had that option, I was always kind of looking for PharmD plus MBA, but I would say it's not necessary. And why I say that is because within the pharma industry, it's not like business. So MBAs hold a lot of value in business, but they don't in the pharma industry. In the pharma industry, it's definitely MD, PhD, and now PharmD that are kind of seen as like, just stakeholders. And I think that if you have sound therapeutic knowledge in the pharmaceutical industry, you are respected. And if you can, really utilize that scientific knowledge. The business side of things, I think you can learn on the side. I don't think a master's is necessary for that. Is it helpful to have business thinking and skills in the industry? Of course, it's a business, it's a company. So understanding why you're doing what you're doing in conjunction with the science is really important. So yes, the science matters, but so does the money. So understanding both is key. And good thing you asked, because I do think that's important. So whatever you can do to get as much information within the business side, whether it's, a macroeconomics class, other electives, or if it's through experiences. So I think it'd be really cool if you were a first year student and you targeted being in the pharma industry, knowing that you could probably do like an internship in finance and an internship in, I don't know, the hospital or something, and then put those together to be like, look, this is perfect. So I do think that edge helps. Don't think a master's is necessary. Outside of that portion, I think there's so much you can do to really help yourself in the industry. I think that pharmacy students specifically have to realize PharmDs are valued in industry, but you have to be worth that. And I don't think that a PharmD alone gives you that. So when you're, at internships, at co-ops, really try to learn the business side of things, really try to be involved in that side of things if you can. And outside of that, school organizations, that's probably the easiest answer. And then even more outside of that, I guess, looking for general solutions. So what that was for me was starting an organization on campus that wasn't already there. And yes, that was, kind of by chance in a way, but that's kind of an idea. If you see that you can start something, or if you can fill a gap of sorts, that skill is going to take you far. So not just in school, but in the workforce. That's how people get promotions. That's how the whole cycle works. It's looking for, hey, look, I could do this for this department, or my department needs this. I could, tell my manager that I have the time to do that, and or being the one identifying the gap, being like, look, I think that, this is a problem and we can fix it like this. So kind of always having that mindset will help, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for innovators. They're looking for people who can come, see something, bring change if needed, and actually execute on that. So kind of have that in the back of your head. If you see things that you would want to change or want to do something a different way, doesn't have to be on such a large scale, but if you start thinking like that, I think you'll naturally get involved in things, because even if you're on let's just say an e-board of an organization, and you notice that something isn't going well, even though that change might not seem like it's huge, you're still making a change, and that is something that's going to be valuable wherever. So I think just having that mindset is really important. How that manifests is really up to you. For me, that manifested, like I said, in that club, most immediately with my channel. So that's kind of, I would say, the basis in terms of thinking to do those extra things. Do those extra things help? If you have a clear vision in what you're doing, why you're doing it, 100% yes. Because industry is the place to be well-rounded. And so again, I think from a pharmacy perspective, you have to really think about that. And I hope kind of my roundabout story and all the little notes kind of helped there. I don't think there's one way to do that. I would say don't do it for the purpose of just doing it. I think really have a cause for it. Otherwise it'll be short-lived. And I think that's something that I've learned over time as well. And that's the transition from kind of going from a student to, actually working. Now is the time to make those things actually, it's not about filling your resume anymore. It's not about graduating anymore. So it's actually about putting the time that you're spending in something and making it worth something. So you don't want to be wasting your time. So think about that aspect as well. I think from, your initiation in terms of reaching out, and even having this conversation shows that you have that skill. So just take that and apply it in something. It could be as small or as big, and it doesn't have to be related to pharmacy at all to help your case, to mention it in interviews, to mention it in pharma. And that, a quick example there, I'm a dancer as well. And I started a dance company, and I brought that up in every single interview. And we would talk about dance and all of these things. So again, not related, but it was important to me. And I thought that it showed a different side. So I wanted to make sure that I mention that always. So again, it doesn't have to be related. I'm going to stop talking because I feel like I'm going in circles now, but I hope that helped. I think the biggest thing is really just thinking outside of the box. And these are all cliche things, but I hope that you can get past the cliche and really see what I'm saying. Because I think that it does matter. It does matter if you do those side things, and it does matter what you're doing them in. And I realize that, things get busy. Everyone is busy. It's not worth spending your time doing something for the sake of making your application look better. So really making sure that you're spending your time in the way that you want, but it's also adding to your whole profile in a really good way.
Mm-hmm. That definitely makes sense and is really good advice. I know I have some outside hobbies, like I am actually training to be a yoga teacher right now. So I was kind of thinking, like, is that something that would work well in an interview? But I guess it does kind of show like leadership skills in a way if you're leading a class. So, and it's really cool that you had a dance studio. That's awesome. So I think, yeah, I was like thinking to myself, like, would companies want to hear about this type of thing? And so it sounds good that they want people who are well-rounded.
Yeah, 100% well-rounded. And I think that kind of comes in with like, show yourself. And if they don't accept it, by that I mean give you the job, then you are probably not going to be good in that role anyway. And that's like, I guess for me, it was like, I would always want to be at a place that wanted me to. And I think that was one thing that also this role specifically, why it felt right. Like they also wanted me, and I was like, okay, that's, you want that too. And I think that you want them for who you are. So at mid-year, I vlogged it for my channel, and I said that in interviews. They were like, tell us something different about yourself. And I was like, I don't know, I'm vlogging today. Do you want to be in it? Like, so and I definitely know it didn't ride well with some people. But with others, it was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And they'll probably remember me. So just kind of being open to just being different. Like, yes, prep, all for interview prepping, but really like not only be yourself, but let your real self shine through, if that makes sense. Like, do yourself that justice. Yeah.
I love that advice. That is very helpful. And thank you so much for all of your advice today. That was all wicked helpful.
No, I'm so glad. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know. You're definitely well prepared being at Northeastern, more so. But if you have any questions, I'm in the Boston area as well, so we can definitely chat and see outside of that. But I definitely thank you for your questions. I think that they'll be really helpful for anyone who's watching this. If I get any good feedback, I'll definitely share it with you. But thank you for reaching out. I really appreciate it. And now you've heard me talk twice, so I really do appreciate it. If you have any other questions, let me know. Happy to answer them. But that is all for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I will have your LinkedIn linked in my description, unless you don't want me to. If anyone else wants to find Rachel, you guys can find her there. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, Rachel. And I'm going to go ahead and end it here.